learned last night, I didn't know this, and I'm sure our Zimbabwean friends all know, but some of our other participants don't know this. There's 16 official languages in Zimbabwe. 70% of the people know Shona, 20% Ndebele, and the rest of you are English. So I'm going to stick to the English because then at least we can all understand each other. But I do want to say, Mangwanami Akanakano, Mauya. I hope my pronunciation works. And Libukile. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, what an amazing year it's been. How tough it's been, but how challenging, how exciting, how interesting. You can decide what your adjective is. So let's do some housekeeping first before we jump into some publicity and then our speakers. I'm so excited about who we have online. So you guys are fully aware of the rules, the house rules, but let's just check. Speakers off, ladies and gentlemen. Your cameras off. And please use the chat box for your questions and observations. In the interest of time, we're going to give the time to the speakers first. And then at the end of the session, we'll have a Q&A and we'll pick up the questions from the box. So you're welcome to put your questions there. You're welcome to put your observations there, your comments, and let's unlock some thrive this morning. Publicity time. Let's do some advertisements. I was very enchanted to see how many associate members, CRM praction fellows we have in the audience. Welcome to all of you, and a special welcome to the individual members. I really want to challenge you and hope that this morning will entice you to start your professionalization journey with IRMSA. There is no doubt that a professional designation in risk management will open, unlock, and pivot you into the risk management world if that's what you are, what your career plan is all about. The opportunities are immense with IRMSA. They have stepped up their game amazingly for 2020 in this virtual world. So just access the training people, access the event people, start thinking about 2021. There's a lot of specials going at the moment. They're running nice specials, as you saw in the adverts, in terms of training for 2021, and you don't have to leave your home for that. A lot of their courses and events are going to continue on a hybrid form. So don't be shy. You don't have to travel. You don't have to leave your house. You'll be able to do it safely and soundly from wherever you are. So take the opportunity. If you are if you're not a member and not part of the IRMSA, go onto the website. You'll be able to see the amount of offerings they have and then connect with us. I'm sure we'll be able to bring you some options for education, for events, and for resource options. The next event that I know of is the 24th of February, Risk Report. So I invite you all to book for that. I think the bookings are already open, so it is an amazing international event. It's no longer a Johannesburg event, and you don't have to come there or go to the regions. You can access them from your virtual platforms. So welcome, please, everybody, look at that. So yes, 2020, what a year, huh? So unexpected, so overwhelming, so risk-rich. I'm going to borrow some of the sayings that I picked up through the year. They're not mine at all. It was a year where we definitely had to engage ourselves with frontline risk management. And our two speakers today are going to share their experiences on that. And with that, I see that there's a few more people that have joined us. So I want to remind you, house rules, chat box for any questions, mics off, cameras off. And now, the special moment, I want to welcome Tendai Charai, who hails from Zimbabwe. Hello, Tendai. Tendai and I go back a long time. He had just come to South Africa, and I interviewed him and secured him as a risk practitioner in those days. I think it's about 18 years ago, Tendai, and it was an amazing time. He was so well rounded as a person and brought such a lot of value into Cape Span, where we worked together for a couple of years. He then went to join the biggest research institution in Southern Africa, and he's a young and ambitious and very passionate risk manager. His qualities are very appropriate for the world that we work in: reliable, ethical, professional, and very positive. And I'm sure he's going to bring a very interesting drive to our 2020 reflections on COVID. Tendai, welcome. We look forward to your presentation.
Thank you very much, Antonella, for the kind words and for the introduction. For a moment, I thought you were referring to someone, not me, but I do take on the kind words. To IRMSA Zimbabwe, to our delegates, Mangwanani, Linjani, hope you guys are well. We are coming live from South Africa. I'm very glad and honored to be part of this engagement. 2020 has been a very interesting year, and COVID came. No one expected COVID to do what it did, but it happened, and we find ourselves today grappling with COVID, and it explains why we're having this session, wherein we're going to zoom in on, you will reflect on COVID, its impact on Zimbabwe, and what we probably need to do as risk management professionals. I hope you can all see my screen. Can I maybe just get confirmation? Antonella, can you see my screen?
Yes, Tendai.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I work for Marsh-McLennan companies as the enterprise risk management lead for Marsh Africa, with responsibility for enterprise risk management for our clients on the African continent. By way of introduction, Marsh-McLennan companies comprises of insurance broking. We do have insurance broking arm in Zimbabwe. We have Guy Carpenter, which focuses on reinsurance and capital strategies. So Marsh and Guy Carpenter have focused on the risk management, risk and insurance services. Then on the consulting bit, we've got Oliver Wyman, which focuses on strategy, economic and brand consulting, and we've got Mercer, which focuses on health, wealth, and career consulting. I'm from Marsh Advisory, and we tend to focus more on a global suite of consulting solutions. Within Marsh Advisory, we're looking at 800 colleagues across 30 countries. In South Africa, with responsibility for Africa, we do have 90 professionals, and our team consists of actuaries, risk professional, management consultants, lawyers, forensic accountants, health and safety inspections, and engineers. So we've got a whole suite of expertise at your disposal. My topic will give an overview of COVID-19 outlook, do a bit of a deep dive into risks on the African continent, understand the impact of COVID on Zimbabwe. Then we also going to look at how we can do what we can do as risk professionals in terms of way forward dealing with COVID and what's in store. I think every organization has been asking urgent questions in relation to COVID and what recovery is going to look like. If we look at the majority of countries, Zimbabwe not being an exception, I think several questions have been asked, or the response has been in one form or another. Part of the response has been asking the question, how deep will this recession go? asking organizations or governments have actually, put in place stimulus packages. Others have been asking, when is the lockdown going to are we going to have a second wave? In South Africa, we are actually going through a second wave. The impact on the European continent has been massive. A lot of countries have actually then gone into a hard lockdown. How will consumer behavior evolve? What has been the impact on our supply chain? And do we need to reassess our product roadmap? These are relevant questions that organizations have been asking, and I guess in the Zimbabwean context, that also remains relevant. Marsh has always partnered with the World Economic Forum in producing what is called the Global World Economic Forum Risk Report. That report is presented every year in January. Due to the impact of COVID, this year Marsh and the World Economic Forum partnered again to produce a COVID-specific risk report. This risk report highlights certain key considerations. One of them is actually economic shifts. What has happened is because of the impact of COVID, we are seeing unsustainable, levels of public debt. We're seeing business confidence at its lowest since 2008, when we had the financial crisis. We are seeing change in equality. The inequality gap is growing, and confidence in public health is at its lowest. From a sustainability perspective, the past 10-20 years has focused more on climate change, but with the impact of COVID, those gains look most likely are going to take a back seat, because whatever financial stimulus is actually going towards economic recovery. We are then also seeing technology, high degree of technology dependencies, wherein back in the days we'll be working from the offices, now there's working from home, and all of a sudden technology is at the fore of everything that we do, and this has in itself increased the exposure to cyber risk. If we look at the top 10 risks that have resulted, as a result of COVID, these can actually be broken down to, call it, 3 broad subcategories. One is about survivability. And here we're looking at the prolonged recession on the global economy. We're looking at bankruptcies, but more importantly, there's an increase in cyber attacks and data fraud due to the shift in working patterns, wherein more people are working from home than what was in the past. At an operational level, we're seeing industries folding. We're experiencing disruptions, in terms of global chains, and tighter restrictions when it comes to border movement. When I think from round about March, a lot of countries took a decision to shut their borders, simply because that was the logical means and ways of containing the impact of COVID. At an economic level, we're seeing weakening of major economies and a sharp increase in inflation globally. But more importantly, it's an economic collapse of an emergency. And Zimbabwe is no exception. It has not been spared when one looks at the impact of COVID. If we then look at risks on the Southern African continent, the risks are predominantly risks of an economic nature. What I have in front of you is risks that are from the January World Economic Forum report. Financial crisis, unemployment and underemployment, energy shock. These are risks of an economic nature. And if we then look at risks that are affecting Zimbabwe as a country, you will actually bear testimony that the majority of the risks are of an economic nature. Comparing 2019 and 2020, there's just a shift in terms of which risks occupy the top 5 positions. but 4 of those 5 top risks are of an economic nature. For 2020, we've got a fiscal crisis, unemployment or underemployment, unmanageable inflation, failure of critical infrastructure, and failure of national governance. I think as Zimbabwean professionals, you can attest that these are the current top risks that you guys are grappling with as insurance professionals in Zimbabwe. It's then important to understand which stage of the pandemic cycle we are in, because the stage that we at then also determines how we're going to respond. We are looking at, call it three phases in terms of responding to the COVID pandemic. The first stage is where employers execute, and you guys will have seen bear testimony to how you have responded to the pandemic in Zimbabwe. So you respond, and there it's about employers executing disruption plans and supporting essential services and working remotely. The second phase is recovery. And here we're looking at a period of volatility. As and when things change, one then goes back to the drawing board and you get to respond. Then the third phase is rebound. In any crisis, you respond, you recover. Then from a business perspective, you then want to rebound to get back to those pre-COVID operating level. And under the rebound phase, you're then looking at reimagining the future of work, considering automation and reskilling, because what COVID has taught us is that the skill that we have is adequate, but we probably also need to have other skills which are going to gear us or sustain us in the future. Looking at the timeline in Zimbabwe, as at 2 December, we had 10,129 confirmed cases, 8,600 recoveries, 277 deaths, and a daily confirmed cases per million population of 677. The COVID timeline, 31st December was the first reported case. In 14 Feb, the first case was reported in Africa, but more importantly in Zimbabwe, we had the first case being reported on the 21st of March in 2020. 30 March, government announced a national lockdown, and 21 July, Zimbabwe went into an indefinite lockdown with the exception of essential services. In October to where we currently stand in December, there has been a rapid decline in the number of cases reported. In August, we then experienced our peak in Zimbabwe, where we had the number of reported cases doubling and the death toll tripling. What are the key observations that we've seen in Zimbabwe? Number one, the infection rate is on the decline. Reopening of economic activities is taking place. As a result, you're seeing schools, churches, bars, restaurants, airports, and tourism opening. The strict lockdown restrictions are being relaxed, and things are slowly returning to normal. And one thing that's then happening is that people are no longer afraid of COVID. People have embraced COVID, and people have said COVID is here to stay. According to World Health Organization, it's a possibility that COVID might be with us until end of next year. So what that then means is we need to start considering how we're going to respond as risk professionals between now and end of the year. It's also important just to compare how Zimbabwean cases. We've done a comparison with Botswana and South Africa. As I indicated earlier on, 3rd of August, we saw almost 500 reported cases on a daily basis, which was double what was previously being reported. In South Africa, we picked almost around the same time in August, and the highest number of cases that were reported in South Africa is 14, in the region of 14,000. But when you look at the distribution, it's almost the same. Botswana picked in October, but the most important thing is that the numbers are declining. So what do we need to do as a risk community, taking into consideration impact of COVID? It's about planning for the future, and that planning means plan for the recovery and the rebound phase. We're looking at four phases. One is obviously managing your operations for whatever portfolios or organizations that you guys represent. And here we're saying you need to maintain operations possible and minimizing the impact of disruptions. You need to focus on people, because people are what sustains the organization. And here it's about maintaining a healthy and productive workforce. Reputational risk is such an important risk that has to be managed by risk professionals, because there has been significant changes in the way businesses operate. With working from home, the cohesive nature, your organizational culture has been disrupted. People are working different times, and it's important that reputational risk is at the core of what you guys are considering as risk management. But more importantly is understanding the financial impact that COVID has on your business. That's pre-COVID, as well as doing a bit of modeling and focusing to look at what is going to look like within the next, call it 12 months, according to the projections by World Health Organization. So what are the emerging lessons for resilience? You realize that most existing business resilience procedures were very limited, in particular how you respond to a crisis. Working from home arrangements are only good on paper, but very difficult to implement. I've got 3 kids, and I should say it has been a challenge. 1 week my kids go to school, the following week they do online learning at home. When they come from school, or the week they don't go to school. It's then balancing my being an employee and being a parent, because I also have to provide or to supervise my kids. So that work-life balance is a lot difficult. Yes, we like working from home. It's the right thing to do in these very trying and difficult times. But at times it then also has an impact, on the social dynamics. The speed of making decisions has to be a lot faster. There's this famous saying, you snooze, you lose, and that's what happens with with COVID. Those organizations which were agile have gained in market share. Those that were slow to respond have kind of like been left behind. And long term, I think staff morale, as well as the mental well-being of employees, of staff, is such a critical part of the recovery and rebound phase. People are working long hours, they're not taking breaks. You don't get to socialize as we used to do, before COVID, wherein, we'll, go for a chat, go for lunch. With working from home, those dynamics are very difficult, and the end game is staff morale is then dampened a bit. What should we then be doing as risk managers, right? So we've got key three steps. The first one is we need to adapt and review our risk management frameworks. In particular, focus on your business continuity plans, and strengthen the decision-making process, right? The end game here is you need to update your business continuity management program. You also need to look beyond immediate sustainable recovery. And part of what this entails is looking at your business operating models, trying to come up with a new business norm, doing stress testing. Consider any possible scenarios that your organizations might be exposed to. Do stress testing, right? But more importantly, you have to be an agile organization. The third point is then you need to target opportunities that strengthen, resilience. Be innovative. Look for that competitive edge. If you don't innovate, right, you are then going to become a market follower instead of being a market leader. So you need to innovate for that uncertain future. Other risk assessments, 3 focus areas. I'm almost done. 3 other focus areas that we need to consider as risk professionals is, looking at what returning to, somewhere along the line, all our staff are going to go back to, to the office, right? And part of what you then have to do is do a back to work readiness assessment. And you need to focus on your people. You need to focus on your business operations, on your supply chain, on your response structure and your team, as well as your insurance and risk management arrangements. It's important that when a decision is made to return the entire workforce, as risk professionals, you have facilitated these sessions and you know what it's going to look like, because ultimately, as risk professionals, part of what we do is facilitating, these risk discussions with executive. Cyber risk is a topical thing at the moment. We have been working from home for the past, call it 10 months, right? And what we need to then consider as risk professionals is how long can we sustain, working from home? And here one needs to look at your security architecture, your workstations. You need to look at how you're going to respond to cyber risks, but more importantly, vulnerability management and access management. Who has access to what platforms, and how is that controlled during this period? The last bit is financial impact modeling. I spoke about that earlier on. Financial impact modeling is you need to model and do a bit of analysis to determine if COVID, what impact is COVID going to have on your organization in the short, medium, and long term. So you need to look at it 6 months. What impact is that going to have under various scenarios, as well as within the next year, where we anticipating COVID will be with us. Summarizing the past 10-20 minutes, I'm saying there are 3 key takeaways. Number 1 is business continuity. COVID is likely to stay. So from a risk management perspective, you need to develop COVID-specific playbooks and adapt your business recovery plans. You need to reinforce cyber security. And the last thing is financial impact modeling to communicate difficult decisions to your stakeholders. This is the last bit of of my slide. This is the Marsh team that's at your disposal. On the line is Peter Links, I think, who's also going to take us through an interesting topic. We will circulate the presentation. If you guys need to reach us or contact us, we are more than willing to share our thought leadership or to have interesting discussions relating to risk management. We support clients in Botswana, Namibia, Uganda, Zimbabwe, and South Africa. Thank you very much, Antonella. I'll hand the floor to you.
Thank you, Tendai. Wow. Yes, what a year it's been, and how important it is for us to be ready for the future. A very practical and concise presentation. Definitely a different ball game that we're in, risk managers. The sheer diversity of this risk just shows you how different skilled we need to be for the future. And I think if there's one thing that's a certain thing that's coming out of this is risk management. You've got to get comfortable with change. There is no other way. We need to be comfortable with change so that we can then be forward looking. Okay, before we introduce our next speaker, I just want to remind everybody that on social media, hashtag IRMSA goes digital, hashtag live with IRMSA, and hashtag IRMSA Zimbabwe. All right, please put that up there so that we can increase our social footprint. And now Peter Links will be joining us. Peter is a big friend of IRMSA. He is a very qualified and knowledgeable person. He has a Oxford MBA and he's obsessed with helping clients. When I read this in his biography, I thought, wow, that just talks to me about Peter. So Peter, welcome. We look forward to your presentation. Have fun. And to our audience, Peter is a very focused professional and a very strong communicator. I love seeing him present because he's so strong. He has exceptional knowledge. Welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Antonella, and thank you everyone for allowing us to be here. Let me just share my screen quickly. There we go. Antonella, if you can just tell me that you can see that.
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. So sweet. Good morning, everyone. It's what a privilege to be able to speak to you today. As Antonella mentioned, I am obsessed with serving clients. My whole career has been as a management consultant, and it's part of my DNA is really to help our clients, think of solutions that they either can think of themselves or that they know that they need to do, but actually don't have the capacity or don't have the scarce skill to be able to implement change in organizations. And so I sometimes get into trouble for spending quite a lot of time doing these webinars, but I do believe as a risk community, we have such a big responsibility to really pull together and share best practice and share the future of risk and the future of strategy, risk, and resilience. You may or may not know that IRMSA is currently working on a new and fresh code to pull together strategy, risk, and resilience, because you actually can't separate the risk discussion from the strategy discussion, nor COVID has shown us from resilience discussion. And so the topic I'd like to speak to today is from one of our sister companies, from MRSA. MRSA is part of the Marsh and McLennan stable, and it's about flexible working. Because I do think as a risk community, as Tendai has highlighted, we've in many ways we've survived COVID, right? We've understood what we needed to do. Yes, there might be some rough edges. You might need to go and update BCPs. You might need to go and update risk policies and frameworks. You might need to test BCPs. But I think we're through the worst of it, except that, of course, the cycles will continue until we have a vaccine. But the question I wanted to talk to you about is something I am grappling with myself, and that's around flexible working. At MRSA and within Marsh and McLennan companies, we truly do believe that flexible work is here to stay. When I asked the CEO of MRSA if I could use her content, to talk to you today about, I think, the next challenge that we as risk professionals will have to deal with, she was like, of course, this content has been around for 2 or 3 years, but COVID has pushed us into this flexible work environment. I am sure it's the same with you, but within 2 weeks, we were all working off-site. IT pulled miracles over weekends, working late nights to get us all laptops and connectivity. But the question is, what's next? What do we do after this? And so I'd like to take you through some thinking around flexible work, how you as risk professionals can help the business navigate flexible work. I think that's important because it does pose some challenges. So back to my, the agenda, I'll just talk about flexible working as a concept. We also want to talk about the benefits of flexible working, thinking about some implementation considerations, i.e. challenges. That's code for challenges. And then Tendai has taken you through how to contact us and our thought leadership. I'm just switching off my video for a second so I can close the sliding door, because one of the challenges of working remotely is the background noise. We've never had to deal with background noise in offices before, so hopefully that's a bit better. So I'm back. There we go. So how do we manage work environment. As we all know, the key question is, how do we take advantage of the benefits whilst also ensuring the risks of working from home or flexible working is managed, and that is our key focus as risk professionals. But what is flexible working? Flexible working is more than just working remotely, right? Flexible working is more than just work from home. It really has 5 key dimensions that we all need to think about in terms of dealing with policy changes that will enable this. The first is where, thinking about location. What is your preferred location, or what is your employees' preferred location? Last week, I worked from Cape Town, right? Antonella is currently working from Portugal. Does your policy allow that? Of course, I cleared my working from Cape Town last week with my boss, but the question is, do you allow employees to work from any region in the world? What are the implications if they're taking work assets with them? So if I'm taking my laptop to Cape Town, are they? I'm based in Sandton. I'm sorry, by the way. What are the implications? So there's a lot more to this where you work from than we sometimes think about. If I work, let's say my parents live in New Zealand, if I worked from New Zealand for 6 months, would that be acceptable? And in particular, how does that affect my status in terms of tax? Am I still a tax resident? So location matters. And so this is something we need to think about. What does our policy suggest in terms of location? The second pillar around when is something in South Africa I think we're quite comfortable with. And we had a webinar with Botswana yesterday, and they said that they weren't quite at the point yet where you work from was acceptable pre-COVID. When is also something we've come to terms with. So I am not a morning person. I don't cope well with mornings, and so my team and the wider Marsh and McLennan company, they understand that don't call Peter before 9 o'clock in the morning, right? In the pre-COVID world, I would rock up at 9, coffee in hand, and then I could start my day, but I would work till 6 at least, as an example. Does your policy allow for people to work their own hours? And then do you contract around it? So it's one thing to say, okay, fine, we're happy with flexible, but then I mustn't show up some days at 10, some days at 7, some days at 6, because we also need to ensure that our core people are at office or available online during core hours. That is quite an important concept, I think. How I think we've dealt with, the ability for individuals to manage their work demands, to work from your phone. I have Zoom on my phone. That's made a massive difference in terms of, I don't have kids yet, but I imagine if you are picking up kids at 3 in the afternoon as a result of COVID, you might still want to be able to take a Zoom call, with hands-free kits, of course, using your phone. So does the technology enable you to work remotely and effectively? The what is very interesting. Some roles are obviously more flexible than others and allow for flexible working, while some might not. How do you ensure that all roles are structured so that it's possible? And then who? We might find that not everyone's role allows for flexible working. Again, if you're client facing at a bank, as an example, it's an essential service during COVID, but you might need core hours, and so there might be less flexibility there. So again, determining who within the workforce we will allow to work flexibly. So hopefully this expands our definition of flexible working just a little bit before I continue. So so the next key nugget is that flexible working has been found empirically, based on our evidence and research, to be beneficial both for the employee but also the employer. And that's quite a critical point that I think we all need to grapple with. So I'm messing with my slides, apologies. So what are the benefits of flexible working for the employer? First of all, there's evidence to prove that there's a boost in productivity, right? The best study we can find was based on Fortune 500 companies, and they showed at least a 1 to 3% increase in productivity as a result of a family friendliness. I would challenge that and say that it's probably much higher, as we've seen, based on my own experience, anecdotal experience. I have one employee, as an example, who used to spend at least 1.5 to 2 hours getting to office, and at least 1.5 to 2 hours leaving office every day. That's 3 to 4 hours a day spent in traffic. This person now, I mean, I actually called her, I think around June, July, and said, how are you getting through all this work? She was churning out projects. And she said, you know what, Peter, I now have 3 additional hours a day. And so I'm actually able to do more, and I'm less tired, right? So because she's not actually, this mental strain of spending time in traffic alone, means that you probably get to office tired already. So definitely in the short term, there are boosts to productivity, and also there's a saving on overheads from the company, and we've all seen that. How our corporate expenses have come down as there are fewer people in office. In the medium term, I think we're all hunting talent, right? And it's very interesting to hear Antonella talk about recruiting Tendai, 18 years ago. Tendai was a client of ours, and I also actively recruited him to join our team because of his wealth of experience. But attracting and retaining talent is difficult for all of us. 80% of employers reported that flexible working enhances their ability to recruit talented employees. Now, I'm not sure if the case is the same with you in Zimbabwe, but certainly on every South African risk register, every single South African risk register, there's a risk around attracting and retaining high talent. And this is an easy win, I would say, if you are struggling to attract and retain talent. Over the longer term, it does help advance diversity and gender parity, and cultivate a healthier workforce. So these are some of the high-level benefits. But of course, as you all know, what matters are the numbers, right? So what are the financial benefits to flexible working? First of all, the obvious one is a reduction in real estate, costs, and we've seen that. Of course, this has a very negative impact on the real estate industry, and I think that we will see that fall out, over in that sector over the next few months and year. If I could just ask everyone to go on mute, I've got some background noise. And Roxanne, if you could just help me put it on mute.
Sorry,
there we go. Thank you so much. Cool. Then in terms of it reduces payroll costs, so this is an interesting one. 38% to 48% of fathers said that they would be willing to take a pay cut in order to achieve better work-life balance. So there's actually potential to we normally talk about the employee value proposition. Often we think that people are only interested in the money, but actually we all make very interesting decisions about what is valuable to us, and flexible work can actually be a lever that you can pull to actually reduce payroll costs to an extent in return for flexible working. And I thought that was quite an interesting flexible work arrangements. There are also reduction in energy consumptions, and so the key note there is that office energy consumption is twice as high as home consumption. So we can save the planet in the process, and there are also reduction in CO2s. So hopefully, I mean, I've demonstrated that there are benefits, beyond the financial, but also financial benefits. In terms of benefits for the employee, in the short term, obviously you save money. I shouldn't say obviously. You probably save money as a result of fuel costs, I would say is the one thing. That might be offset by an increase in Wi-Fi costs, as an example, if you're working remotely and don't have a 3G card. But in most organizations, 3G cards have been provided. So that is quite a big. Also, what I have found is I used to drink 2 to 3 coffees a day, at least from the local coffee shop. That was like about 100 Rand a day, right? Now I have to make coffee at home, which is far cheaper. So I've saved probably about 80 Rand a day just on coffee. Also, I used to, because of the nature of consulting, you're always running in and out and getting a sandwich from coffee shops and places that are more expensive. We're now cooking at home, right? And you can kind of have last night's supper on a sandwich. And so there's certainly money can be saved. It saves time. Time is obviously our most valuable commodity these days in terms of average commuting times. But again, you might say that because we're all working remotely now, I have seen that people are working longer hours. But as they say, the pendulum swings, right? And I think we've swung quite far to the side of like Zoom meetings galore. I do long for a time when we will find that balance somewhere in the middle about, where we are Zooming less and actually can spend more time productively. In the medium term, it allows people to become more engaged and energized, because they have flexibility about how they manage their life, right? And it really does, interestingly, flexible work ranked third across all age groups, just after competitive pay and health insurance as the most important thing for being happy at your job. So again, quite an inexpensive lever to pull in order to make sure that your workforce is highly engaged and you can attract and retain top talent. But third after pay and health insurance, that's obviously US data, I think, if using the word health insurance. And then over the longer term, you allow the employee to actually gain control over their life and their lifestyle. And again, we're all competing for the same small pool of talent, and so flexible working is again a lever that you can pull quite easily. Why does all of this matter? It matters for what we call the employee experience, right? And if you want to attract and retain top talent, the employee experience is something that we as risk managers should start looking into and seeing, do we even have the employee experience mapped out? But some of the benefits are listed below. We see that companies who have flexible work schemes on average earn 16% more. Stock prices on average 16% higher than those who don't. We see that it improves team performance, it improves innovation. We're now using, as an example, and I use my own examples all the time, hopefully to demonstrate the point. We're now using online platforms that we didn't know existed within the firm. So we now use OneDrive, we now use SharePoint more effectively, right? Whereas before we used to email things, we're now becoming more savvy about how we're creating team groups on SharePoint. So really being pushed into the future. And you see some of the other benefits listed below. So I won't read all of these, and we will share these slides with you. So please don't worry about that. But we are risk professionals, and we know, people like to sell us the dream, but also there are often implementation challenges, right? And so what are some of the challenges that do exist? First of all, we've got to talk about manager trust and confidence. I think previously there was a mindset that you needed to be seen to be working. So it's something we call presenteeism. So only if you're there from 8 to 5 are you actually working, even though you could have been sitting there emailing your friends, right? You're on email, you look productive, but you may not necessarily have been so. So building trust and confidence within the organization is going to be something that's critical. COVID has helped us with that, right? But there are still some challenges, especially with younger employees. I think who are new to the firm, where they don't quite understand the culture, and they don't. I get the sense they don't understand the sense of urgency always, because they've just joined and they're working from home, so they don't get the culture. We run into trouble when there's inconsistent application of the policy. So it is important that A, there is a policy, and B, that we actually are not being inconsistent with staff members. So if you contract to working 7 to 4 and I contract to working 9 to 6, we must be consistent with that. We must contract around it, and there must be consistency throughout. Otherwise, it breaks trust and confidence in the policy and the process. We must make sure that there's infrastructure in place that is now well understood. And then finally, in terms of health and well-being, social, I was talking about culture earlier, and I don't want to generalize, but especially with some of my friends and colleagues who live alone, who are single, it can be can become quite lonely, quite frankly, right? And so how do we find that balance so that you still have team social, that you still have team days. This Friday, as an example, I have said to my team that I'm going to be in office all day. Whoever feels comfortable joining, please join, and we'll complete our self-assessments together, and we'll do timesheets together, etc. Obviously, social distance with masks, but you know, just so that people have an opportunity to feel team, to feel culture, to feel the values of the company. So a focus on health and well-being of your employee is still going to be important, and also the risk of being always switched on is a significant one. So those are some of the challenges that we need to think about, and we've given some of the solutions on the right hand side. You know, training is going to be important for all individuals, especially across the age gap. And one of the questions we had yesterday from Botswana was, you know, some of the old, and this is generalization, some of the older generations maybe don't believe in work from home as much. And so how do you get buy-in? And training is the key thing, I think, there. And understanding the benefits and the financial benefits to work from home, I think, makes a big difference. You know, we need to build an organization with more trust, and etc. So, but I mean, I'll let you have a look through that. I'm sure you've looked at that already. So my final slide is, you know, how do we then drive the sustainable execution of flexible working as a policy? Well, look at the foundational enablers on top. Those are the critical building blocks. It needs to be a policy. You know, there must be policy around it, and there must be governance around it, and that is critical to the success of working from home and our future. Because I do believe we will move into a future where most companies will have flexible working arrangements, unless, of course, for those that are essential services, where, you know, building culture and trust is key, and I've spoken about that extensively. Also, leadership buy-in and training. And then I think maybe the most important one, and this is the final point I will talk about and then hand back to Antonella to take your questions, is around communication of the change. One of the things I also see that we all struggle with is how to communicate remotely with each other. And I don't know if, and this is again a generational gap sometimes, but some generations, especially the younger generations, millennials in particular, don't like to phone, hey? Like they want to send you a WhatsApp or they want to email you, but talking to people has almost become like this scary thing to do. And it's now become pervasive across all generations, I think. And so often, you know, you see those email loops of like the 20 emails back and forth because they're just missing each other. I have had to send 1 or 2 emails to say, please just phone each other, right? And then 20 emails is reduced to a 2-minute phone call, because, you know, in working remotely, you don't get to judge. And as Africans, we are people, right? I want to read your body language. I want to look into your eyes. I want to understand your emotions. But we miss that in this digital world. And so we must find ways to put tools in place that allow people to still communicate with each other in an effective way. And yeah, I think that is, I will leave it there. I think it's a good place to end. There's some more detail there. Of course, if you believe that you need help with this, you know, reach out to any one of us. We'll put you in contact with the right people, from MRSA in particular. But I think that from my perspective, the final point to say is, you know, I think we have learned that when you have empathy, as we've all had to have during this difficult time, that is what's going to make the difference in terms of making this policy workable for everyone. You know, leading firms listen, and listen to your employees. Understand what their take is on work from home. We've actually had surveys within our firm to understand which proportions of the employee population like working from home, with who don't, you know, how many days they would like to work from home every week, ideally, you know. So we're trying to get a sense of what the people want, not to sound like Nelson Mandela, but you know, so listen to your employees. And I think if you do that, we really can use working from home as a critical lever to actually attract and retain high talent, and actually, as risk managers, to make sure that the policies and governance is in place so that when we do return to home, because as soon as vaccines are made available at a large scale, I do believe that we will be moving back into the old world potentially. And so we need to think one step ahead about finding that balance. I hope that's been insightful, and we look forward to questions. Thank you, Antonella.
Thank you, Peter. That was insightful. That was excellent. I'm sure you've opened a lot of thought there and provoked people into the new normal and the game changer that has happened, not only within the physical environment, but definitely between in the human resource and the personal environment. So thank you. That was excellent. So before we go into a couple of questions, I just want to remind everybody, please send your selfies and don't forget the hashtags. Send them out. We want to be strong on social media. And I want to thank everybody for all your wonderful compliments. So Tendai, we have a nice question from the floor. Honest has asked a question. I don't know if you've seen it already, but he wants to know what, if any, upside benefits from this COVID outbreak from a risk management point of view in the region and beyond do you anticipate?
Right. Thanks, Antonella, for the question. Honest, very good question. I think the slide that Peter presented, one of them spoke about the benefits in terms of reduction in cost of real estate, reduction in productivity, reduction in energy consumption. I think those are some of the key benefits that have accrued to organizations on the African continent. What I think needs to then happen in terms of COVID is, if we look, say, within South Africa, we have started manufacturing a lot of PPE, which is your personal protective equipment, your face masks, hand sanitizers. We have one of our clients who is very big in the sugar industry, who before COVID happened, they were doing relatively well, but when on the onset of COVID, they took a strategic decision to start manufacturing ethanol, which is a requirement when you look at your hand sanitizers. It needs to have 70% alcohol content. So what then has happened with this sugar client is it has boosted their sales by close to 30, if not 40%. So whilst other organizations have been affected, at a global level, there are those organizations which have actually exploited and said, we can actually, manufacture some of these things, internally. So massive opportunities. I don't think all entities have considered, exploiting the opportunities, but you do have those, as from the example that I've given, where they have actually strategically made a decision to say, we're going to shift our production line, focus on ethanol, which is a key component of sanitizers, and we're going to, drive that aggressively. Then the other benefits, which I think Peter alluded to in terms of reduction in cost of real estate, the work-life balance, increased productivity, as well as reduction in energy consumption. I hope I've answered your question, Honest.
Thank you, Tendai. Yes, that was it was all about, there were two options. A lot of people said that with COVID, there were many options, but there were two options. You either went under a rock and waited until things got better, and then by the time you joined the bus, it's not there anymore, or you decided to diversify. So the sheer diversity, I think, of the COVID risk, the depth and width of it has definitely brought about such a lot of opportunity. And with that, I want to lead into a question for Peter, because the opportunity has been immense, Peter. Teleworking, as they call it, teletrabalho here in Portugal. So every time I come overseas, I come for holiday, and I do. I love summer. I hate winter, and today we're expecting ice and snow, they say, on my weather forecast. So, and this year when I came along, everyone said, oh, you're going to have a good time. And what about the festas and all the fun time? And I said, no, I'm teleworking. Yeah. And it's been very, very interesting. But it's changed the dynamic of being here, because clearly, apart from the COVID lockdown that we're experiencing in Europe at the moment, it was just normal. You know, you escape quickly to the shop to get your daily provisions and come back to work. So I can relate a lot, like everybody else, with your example. But one of the questions I have is, hasn't teleworking brought about a digital divide? Is there, and what is the technical feasibility of this? You know, is teleworking and flexible working, as you call it, not going to work for the poor, for the part-timers? Will it not amplify the intergenerational inequality? So there's a lot of questions there that I'm posing, and I don't expect you to answer all of them, but it definitely will change the world, the new world. And I'll leave it there. I've got more comments, but I'll leave it there.
It's a great question, Antonella. Yeah, I think the technological divide probably existed before, right? And this has now deepened inequality. And some of the Marsh and McLennan studies has shown that. We've done a study with the World Economic Forum, which says, you know, that it's created even more of a technological divide. But, you know, always as a risk manager, you know, thinking about the flip side, in history, you know, the arc of history is long, and you often need events like this to actually be a tipping point, right? So as an example, people within our firm who had never had a laptop, right, who'd never, and again, we're in a privileged position, but, you know, who always were desktop bound, within 2 weeks, everyone in the firm had a laptop, right? I have some examples from family where, you know, massive organizations with 30,000 employees, you know, all went remote. Within a matter of weeks. So in a way, COVID has been an opportunity to push us over the edge and to actually provide an impetus for us to move into a digital age. We've been talking about the fourth industrial revolution for like months. We've been talking about, you know, the future of work for years, you know, and the future of work happened in 2 weeks, right? Call it 4. The fourth industrial revolution was given impetus and reach its tipping point in the space of a month. So I'd like to see it more as an opportunity. So it's really pushed us into that world. But the outcome, to your point, is a more divided society, potentially, for those who have never had access are now even more removed from access, right? And I mean, I would pose the question back to the group. You know, what are some of the solutions that we've seen that has actually helped bridge that gap? We are famous as Africans for being innovative through need, right? And so often as Africans, what they say is we leapfrog technologies, or we leapfrog stages in development, and we have to come up with other solutions. So I'd be very interested to hear from the group if there are, you know, other solutions that we're seeing, you know, entrepreneurs who are actually trying to bridge that gap, especially here on our continent, where we often have to come up with workarounds, right? But workarounds that then leapfrog whole stages in development. And the classic example, of course, is, you know, in telecommunications, most developed countries went from you know, no telecommunications to fixed landlines, and then to mobile. In Africa, we went straight to mobile, right? So fixed landlines almost wasn't a phase in our development, and we went straight to mobile. Also, in some of our sister countries, banking industries weren't that mature, and we just leapfrogged, you know, ATMs and went straight to M-Pesa, as the famous example in East Africa. So straight to mobile money. So I'd be interested to hear if there are other examples of where we've now done that as a result of this big trigger in global history. We've all been pushed into the fourth industrial revolution, and if there are any cool solutions, because it would be useful to share on this platform.
Yes, thank you, Peter. I've been following the chat box, and I don't see any other questions or comments. So I want to open the floor just for a few seconds, if I may. We've got a little bit of time. If anyone has a quick question that you want to pose it, put your hand up and I will give you the floor for a quick question. Are there any takers? Any bold people? No, yes, no. Let's see, no. I don't think so, huh?
I'm also just checking the chat. Yeah, we've got time, so
we've got a
if
little
anyone,
bit of time.
yeah.
Yes.
So if anyone has a pressing question, happy to work through it together, right?
All right. If while we wait for somebody, I'm going to. It doesn't matter. I would like to take this. How will the role of risk management change? Would you like to elaborate a little bit on that in a practical way for our audience? Will it change drastically? Has it changed? How are we going to be more futuristic?
Right. Thanks, Antonella, for the difficult yet very relevant question. I will seek to split it apart and give my 2 cents. So, if we look at the evolution of the risk profession, right? In the past, risk was more compliance driven, more an afterthought. If you remember, Antonella, when we worked together, our organization would was on an expansion drive, global expansion drive, and in certain instances, risk was only requested to come to the party after decisions had been made. So there's now that evolution from, tick box or compliance based. What COVID has then done is all of a sudden, board executive are actually then coming to risk management and actually say, risk, what is your view of this? How do what can we do? What opportunities abound? How can we mitigate and manage these risks? So all of a sudden we have a seat at the table, which is one thing that we have actually been, pushing for, trying to advance. Now that we've had that seat, right, going forward, what we now need to do is to, turn whatever information or insights into intelligence. It's about using information at our disposal, right? And giving guidance to C-suite and more importantly to the board to say, guys, let's not just focus on the downside. There are massive opportunities. The example that I've given, with the sugar, with the sugar client, that's an example where one is actually saying, in all this chaos lies massive opportunities. And with these opportunities, you've not just you've kind of like transitioned from being a cost center to actually a profit center, who is actually saying to the organization, oh, probably consider going in this direction. So you then become a strategic business advisor, and that's where I think lies a massive opportunity for risk management professionals. And let's be bold, right, and intentional in our efforts to drive value and preserve value in the organization. Put your hand up, come up with the necessary discussions, engage with C-suite. That's where we should be playing. Ultimately, it's not about, if you look at risk, you probably have 3 layers. You've got line, so probably call it two layers. You've got line or operations, then you also have the board, executive and the board. We are strategic advisors to the board. That's where we should be in. Those are the people who should be engaging, board and exco. And let's be bold, let's be intentional. Thanks, Antonella.
Thank you, Tendai.
And if I may add,
Yes.
if you don't mind, Antonella, what I'm seeing is, I'll give you some practical examples. I mean, we facilitate strategic risk workshops often for clients, and we would have to drive out there, right? You'd have to fly to a different city, which has an impact on the environment. It's time lost. And then you get into a room, and sometimes, and often the reason we're asked to facilitate independently is, there are some voices in the room that are louder than others. That's me putting it delicately. And so often the quiet voices in the room are kind of overruled. And so it's part of our job is to coax out that view. But Zoom is very democratic. It really allows everyone to put up their hand. I see Honest has put up his hand, allows people to put up their hand, to give their comments in the chat section. So it's democratized, the strategic risk discussion to an extent. We're also seeing a move to doing online surveys, pre-online surveys. So we'll survey people beforehand in terms of, what are the inherent risks. And so you're using the tools more, so a future of risk is going to be tool driven. It's going to be, and getting sort of independent feedback. So I've seen that for sure, and that's been useful. And then finally, one of our clients has operations in the US, and previously we tried to pitch to go and do the work in the US, but it was too expensive because we had to take like 3 different flights, and it was going to cost 100,000 Rand. And now we're going to do the whole thing for like under 50,000 Rand, right? And so it's actually pulled us all closer, and you can pull everyone into the room now. Before it was like, oh, I can't attend that meeting because I need to go here and there. Now everyone can jump on. So I would say the future of risk is more of a democracy than ever before.
Of that description, the future of risk is more of a democracy. Absolutely, it's so true. Honest, I see your hand is up. Would you like to come forward? You can unmute yourself. No.
I think he's coming, and there's also a Tabitha, or yes. Tabitha. Yeah.
So I think.
Good morning, everyone. It's Tabitha speaking.
Good morning, Hi, Tabitha. Welcome. Thank you. Let's go.
Yeah, thanks for all of this. I do appreciate it. I think it's good to hear what's going on in our region, as in the SADC region as well. Because I think no matter what, we're all in it together, and one neighbor suffering is another neighbor suffering as well. So appreciate IRMSA doing this. So what I want to say is I like to agree with I think what's been said earlier, that we are quite innovative, and I think that's one way to deal with a lot of the economic risk that's coming out. And I think just that also leans on the strength, the social strength of the people, knowing that they can do this. And I'm a risk person at heart, but I've also realized that the social aspect is big. When people don't believe they can do something, they won't be able to do that. And then so, I've leaned a lot on the mentoring coaching side as well, to try and elevate that social aspect, or try and be part of a solution that will elevate the social impact, because then when people feel they can do that, and then they're able to see beyond themselves, beyond the problems, beyond what they're faced with, and they then can come with that innovation comes in. They see the opportunities even in dire situations, and that's when the entrepreneurial side comes in, and our solutions on the job, and we can be able to deal more with the the economic issues that we have. And secondly, I feel strongly, that being said, I don't think we need a lot of loans. I really don't think so. I think we as Africans have our own solutions at hand, and we can do it. A lot of the countries, I've just heard, I think it was Botswana the other saying, China relies on us to give us a lot of, was it iron ore or something, they said. So we've got a lot of agricultural resources, mining resources, a lot of resources that we own. So why do we need a lot of loans? Now I know this is an age-old debate that's been going forth before I was even born, I think. But I do think that when we elevate people and they know they can do it, then they can become the solutions that we've been wanting for so many decades. But anyway, thanks. That's all I got to say.
Tabitha, well done. You've actually put it in such a nice perspective. As soon as and I think this, going back to Peter, the teleworking, and people were elevated and realized that they had access to the CEO and the CRO immediately, because now you can knock on that Teams meeting request and say, hello, how are you? I was wondering. You couldn't do it before. You couldn't walk to his office because that door was not closed. Now it's open. So Tabitha, thank you, yes, for showing us practically how that comes up. Honest, would you like to take the floor before we wrap up? Welcome. You're on mute, Honest.
Roxanne, if you're still online, can we see if we can potentially help unmute Honest? And maybe if I can just share with, to follow on what Tabitha has said, is that, you know, we really need to start sharing our stories, you know, sharing our stories of success. One of my favorite quotes is, unless the lion learns to write, the story will always glorify the hunter. Unless the lion learns to write, the story will always glorify the hunter. So, you know, so we need to tell our stories. And that's why I was saying, you know, let's share examples of how we have helped bridge this digital divide, because it is so important that we share our own stories from our own history, our own social context. And like what Tabitha said about social strength, we have so much social strength, and that's how we innovate. That's how we support each other. And so, yeah, but we must share our stories. And so I think that would be, as we think about launching IRMSA or a community of IRMSA in Zimbabwe, I think sharing stories is going to be critical.
Right. Maybe, thanks, Peter. Maybe I can, Honest had posted a question on the chat. And he says, my other question is, there has been calls to establish COVID compliance officers in organizations. Is this not an encroachment into risk management professionals field? I think that's probably the question that he wanted to ask. I will try to respond to the question. So I think what has happened, especially if we look at you know, the South African landscape, as part of managing you know, the impact of COVID, a decision was taken at a parliamentary level to include COVID compliance officers. And the whole drive or motive behind it is you want to, one, you're dealing with a pandemic, right? Health and safety of employees is of utmost importance. The key role or responsibility of the COVID compliance officer has been to specifically drive health and safety within, you know, within organizations, with a specific focus on COVID, making sure that the revised legislation is implemented at an organizational level, as well as implementation of the relevant safety and security protocols in relation to COVID. Is it encroaching into the risk management professional? My personal view is it is not. You, however, need to partner. I think from a risk management perspective, we need to partner with the compliance officer, right, and provide oversight and ensuring that the compliance officer is doing what is expected of them from a legislative perspective. We still need to partner with the COVID compliance officer, or even so the compliance function, because part of an organization's operating environment that we have to be conscious or aware of as risk management professionals is the regulatory environment, because that is what governs how organizations respond. And as risk professionals, we should then partner with the compliance function and ensuring that the organization is compliant to the laws of the land.
Thank you, Tenda. I think that was well put, because it's not a new role, it's an existing role. It's just elevated so that we ensure employee safety, which is a key outcome of COVID. You know, that was employers, governments, that's what they looked at and are still looking at. All right, Vilma, would you like to, Honest, I hope that answered your question. I see your hand is still up, but I presume it's just a timing difference. And your mic is still, oh, okay. Vilma, please go ahead. Welcome.
Welcome, everyone. And I will first of all, I thank you all for the presenters and you, Antonella, for taking us through this wonderful and insightful presentation. My what I have here is, I'm dialing from Lusaka, Zambia. My concern is most organizations were caught unaware and have been affected by the financial risk. In Zimbabwe, what are the plans? Is there any kind of like relief for COVID-19? And if those reliefs were there to take care of the companies that are struggling, companies have already been struggling in Zimbabwe. And COVID-19 has actually escalated the situation to levels that are not good for the organizations. Most of them, in terms of business continuity, they have been affected. They were affected already, but the problem has escalated to higher levels because of the COVID-19. What measures have been put in place to relieve those companies, if any? And what measures are in place to mitigate the abuse of these relief funds, if those funds are available?
Yes, Wilma, thank you very much. That's a very good question. And as we know, globally, the contributions that came from government and the example that was set in Europe when it started was amazing, because even the poorest of poorest countries were able to support their companies, their people. In South Africa, there's been a whole lot of contributions. In Europe, the same, etc. So I don't know if there's an expert in our audience that would like to take the question, or if Tendai or Peter have any information that they could share on this. I personally don't have, so I can't answer the question. Is there anyone that has an answer to this?
Antonella, if you could just rephrase the question for me quickly.
So what support was given to companies in Zimbabwe for COVID, and how were what plans were put in place to avoid stifling and misappropriation of those funds?
Okay, thanks, Sentinel. Yeah, I'm not able to answer from my side. Yeah.
Wilma, if you will allow us, I will get someone to come back to you with an answer if we don't get anybody else on the floor that has that. I know from the audience there were a couple of government people, but I'm not sure if, and there's obviously there's 44 people or more that registered from Zimbabwe themselves, so they would have experienced it. No one from Zimbabwe that wants to comment on what government support was for COVID and how funds were or were not misappropriated? Okay, Vilma, I'm sorry. Okay, we have a hand. Tapera, welcome. Would you like to comment on the question?
Right, I think my morning to everyone.
Good morning.
Right, I think my comment will be, there was a package that government talked about, but like you said, it needs further research as to who was able to apply for that package and did they get anything. As for myself, I work for a small private clinic. We did not apply for anything along those lines, and I'm not aware of anyone who applied and got such funds. But the government did talk about having a plan or a package for COVID relief.
Thank you, Tapera. Yeah, I think in South African terms, we call that the TERS, which was an extension of the UIF, unemployment fund support, as well as other company benefits. I appreciate your response. So unfortunately, Wilma, as you can see, doesn't seem like there was a very strong support, which is disheartening, unfortunately. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, in the interest of time, I would now like to close the first webinar for Zimbabwe. And when I say close, it doesn't mean we're going to stop the conversation. We must continue this conversation. In 2020, in fact, in late 2019, IRMSA published its theme for 2020, and they said they were looking forward to a risk intelligent future. I don't think they understood the depth of that meaning when 2020 arrived and it came with COVID. Definitely, it set the scene for, it was a very relevant vision that they had. And I want to remind all of you, in whatever role you are in, whether it's a risk or internal audit or compliance role, or just part of a small business, being an activist and a risk activist is essential to being risk intelligent and preparing yourself for the future. We are living in a vortex of risks, and it's not going to stop here. And I'm sorry to say, Peter, I don't think it's going to go back to the old way, the way we knew it. It's going to change, and therefore the imperatives of the future is going to be agility, digital imperativeness, and adaptation. So for the next new normal, and as I said earlier, as risk managers, we're going to have to learn to adopt a change strategy. That's what it's all about, and it came strongly through on Tendai's message. It came strongly through on Peter's message. So with that, I want to say that we are very excited about this first risk webinar for Zimbabwe. We are planning to start a risk chapter for Zimbabwe, so watch the space. We're going to come up with more. Thank you for all your support. Thank you for everybody that attended. Thank you to my valuable speakers as well as IRMSA for arranging this. We couldn't have done it without everybody. And I want to say goodbye and good luck. Best wishes for 2021. Whatever comes your way, be ready, be active, be active. And I'm going to try Tendai, Rombo Rakanaka, Uye, Rombo Rakanaka. I hope that's right. Be well, and thank you, everybody.
Cheers, everyone. Bye-bye. Thanks, Antonella.
Thanks, Antonella.
Effort, Antonella.
Thank you, Antonella. Bye.
Ciao, ciao.
Goodbye, everyone.